Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the September 3rd, 2024 Post Falls City Council meeting. Rhiannon, please note that all council members are present. Under ceremonies, announcements, appointments, a couple announcements. Wade said earlier we are having some technical challenges due to the remodel, so bear with us as we go through it. And as he said, be sure and speak into the microphone. And we're only going to have one screen instead of the two this time, so apologize for that inconvenience. Second announcement is please note that the next City Council meeting will be Monday the 16th of September as opposed to the 17th, Tuesday the 17th. The meeting will be Monday the 16th due to some scheduling conflicts, so please note that. We do have an item, Idaho Sunshine Kootenai County Fairgrounds Health Clinic. I think we had a presentation last week. Do we have another one tonight? Or 2 weeks ago? See nobody? Apparently not. Are there any amendments to the agenda tonight?
We have none tonight, sir.
Any declarations of conflict, ex parte contact, site visits? Seeing none, would you please present the consent calendar?
Item A is minutes from the August 20th, 2024 City Council meeting. Item B is payables 8/13 to, so it looks like August 13th of 24 through September 3rd of 24. Item C is consultant contract for Warren Park frontage improvements. Item D is Boyd's Landing First Edition Subdivision Construction Improvement Agreement. Item E is surplus Woodbridge Playground. I believe that should say equipment. Item F is MOU with Panhandle Health District for administration of Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer Ordinance. And there were, I think, 2 changes to the minutes.
Two corrections, one, yeah.
There was just the vote for the public hearing on the budget was not in there. So we added it to the ones that will be signed,
Okay,
but in your packet, it wasn't
The
in
minutes
there.
stated that I called the meeting to order. It was Council President Malloy. So if you could make that change, I was absent.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Any other questions on the consent calendar?
I have a question about item C.
Sure.
How was JUB selected for that contract?
How?
Yeah, did we look at any other companies or?
Bob Steele, Community Development Director. JUB is on the short list, the consultant list that we go out to every 2 years to have consultants put on that roster, and JUB was selected as the best of the applicants that have been on that list.
Gotcha. And
So-
just remind me of the process, because the price was only $100,000, it like doesn't have to go out to a formal bid, or is that just because it's not that type of service?
It doesn't have to go out because it's it fits within that roster, and it is below a certain dollar threshold.
Okay.
That dollar
That's it.
threshold I don't 100% know though.
It's also a professional services contract,
Yeah.
and we put those out on to get a pre-approved list. So we pre-approve a list of design engineers, and then we can pick and choose from that list.
Gotcha.
And that's every
Okay.
2 years field?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be doing it again later this year.
That we put the list together, not that we pick the
Correct.
individual company.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
The list is compiled by applicants from the area that have those expertises. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much. No, I don't have any other questions.
Okay, thank
Anyone
you.
else?
I just got a random question on item E, the surplus of the playground equipment. I don't remember ever seeing surplus playground equipment on the agenda before, and of course my memory's not that great either, but how often do we actually surplus playground equipment?
So most of our equipment lasts a very long time,
Right.
and you're looking at 20 to 25 years sometimes for the playground equipment. Woodbridge, we did come in and they actually left the old playground equipment while they installed the new, and so they're getting ready to take down the old now. And actually, when you go on your tour, you'll see the equipment, but it's very rare that we're going to come forward with playground equipment surplus. Sometimes also it's just been destroyed or damaged.
So we do turn it over every 20-ish years then?
Something like that.
Part of it's probably because of new safety requirements, et
Right.
cetera. Things will continue to change, so.
And I think some of our older stuff was metal, now it's a lot of plastic and stuff, it doesn't last quite as long, but we do repair and rehab a number of our pieces of equipment each year to try to keep it so that it lasts as long as possible.
Yeah, it was just more of a curiosity than anything, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the consent calendar as amended with the minutes from last meeting.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Stigleader,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next up tonight is public hearings. We do have two. Anyone who wishes to testify, please fill out the form on the dias in the back and present them to Rhiannon, and we will let you speak. The first item up is the fee hearing for fiscal year 2025. I'll call the public.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Hopefully not a fear hearing.
I was going to say fear healing, and I knew that wasn't quite right.
That might be worse, I don't know. All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is our annual fee hearing. We typically try to do a fee hearing once a year. Occasionally, we'll have to increase fees somewhere along the line in the year, and we might have more than one, but typically we try to have one every year during our budget season. So state law requires that we have a hearing on each new fee, and every time a fee increases by more than 5%, we typically bring all fee increases to you, so you see all of the fees that are either new or going up, one or the other. Following the hearing tonight, we would bring back to you at the next meeting the fee resolution, which would adopt the fees that would go into effect. So with that, diving into the fees, what I've tried to do on each slide is to show you what our existing fee is, where the fee is going. I will tell you in the presentation, I do not have all 55 slides. I'm not intending to go through them. Unless you're gluttons for punishment, we can do that. So for water, the fees are going up 3%, and that is based on the financial model in our water master plan. So we project out what we need to do to adjust those rates so that we're being able to fund all of the capital projects to continue to provide the service. So these are the water user rates that we're looking at for the next year. The water usage rate, which is the per gallon cost for water, that's what this rate is. They're going up again 3%. Wastewater, it's going up 2.5%, again based on the financial model and the master plans. You can see the base charge as well as the per gallon charge, and then the minimum utility charges. Solid waste is a little bit different. That's a contracted service. It's also a utility, but we contract to provide that service. And the rate is increasing based on the agreed upon contractual language that we have with post-fall sanitation. This year, that's a 6% increase. What I'm showing you here is the residential rates. Towards the end of the slide, if you have questions about the commercial rates, they're back behind the sort of the end slide. I've got all of the rest of those slides available if you want to dive into any of the commercial account in language. So this is what we have for increases for solid waste. Cemetery fees, these are largely increases based on the cost to provide the service. You'll notice mostly we're looking at changes for the cost to inter or open and close a grave. The one thing that's kind of interesting here is we do double depth burials, and so we have an increased cost for that bottom burial. And that cost doesn't include the equipment. We took a look at, does it make sense for us to buy the shoring to be able to have that equipment available? We don't do enough of them that it made financial sense to actually own that piece of equipment. So that cost is $750 plus the cost of renting the shoring to be able to provide that double depth. So recreation, we have some fees going up in our recreation department. Recreation each year looks at the cost of providing services. They look at what services they're providing. Is there a need for a new service? They sometimes end some of the programs that they've been offering. Again, I'm only showing you the increased fees or the new fees. You'll note that there are some differences. Sometimes we have a residential versus non-residential rate, and those are typically programs that we provide in-house. And when we provide them in-house, we typically have a lower rate for the resident versus the non-resident because the tax dollars are helping to pay for providing that service. If we contract that service out, it's typically based on the contracted price, and that may or may not include a resident versus non-resident rate. So here's another slide. We have one more slide of recreation. I'll give you a second to look at those. And that's the last recreation slide. Community development has a couple of new fees, and these are based on some changes. A while back, we had a discussion about a process for accepting or potentially accepting private roads that someone might want to dedicate to the city. We needed to set a fee to run that process. That's included in this. We also have a new fee for a master sign permit.
Why is the mailing fee going down $5? Did mail get cheaper?
So that fee was probably too high. I think that's why we're bringing it down. It doesn't cost $6 to provide that service.
What is that service?
So it's essentially mailing,
Mailing what?
the notice of the hearing.
To
So it-
all of the people in the 3-mile radius? That?
So it's per mailing.
Oh, I see. Oh, so we're
it was
charging
too high, and
$6.
So we're bringing it down
Okay.
closer to the cost of providing the service.
I see.
The fee should only be based on what it costs to provide the service.
Okay.
And so that one was set a little bit high, so we're bringing it down to where it should be.
Okay.
All right, the impact fees, we adjust these annually in addition to the periodic larger impact fee increases. This is based on the engineering news record index that tracks construction inflation. So we up these annually. This year it's going up 2.29%. So what I have for you on the two slides I was going to cover was the residential rates, both single family and then multifamily. Again, we have the commercial and other user slides later if you want to look at those. This is what we're seeing there. Just note that the fire and EMS fees are not a city fee. Those are adopted by the fire and EMS districts. We just simply collect them for them at the time we issue the permits. We have an agreement with them to do that.
These are per dwelling of the multifamily, correct? Not per
Yes.
project? Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
per door, essentially, so
Okay.
per dwelling unit. So that's the quick and dirty on the fees that are going up. As I indicated, the next step would be to bring back to you a fee resolution to adopt the new fees. So tonight, we would be looking for a motion to either bring it back to you as presented, or if you want to make changes, let us know what those changes are so we can incorporate them into the resolution. And with that.
Any
happy
questions,
to
Warren?
Answer questions. I will most likely point you to the experts. I will say that I am playing Dave tonight. He had something come up last minute tonight, and so I'm playing Dave, so.
Yeah, I have a quick question on the impact fees. I know at a couple points, the discussion has come up of trying to sort of district out the city and have different impact fees based on where it is. Is that something that has to wait until we do the next comprehensive plan update?
So that is actually ongoing. We are working through an impact fee update right now. You should be getting an update in a month, October 15th.
Okay.
We'll come to you and have a brief update on that. That process is ongoing. That will be essentially a retooling of all of the impact fees, and then in the interim between those years when we adopt them, we ratchet them up by ENR so that we're staying up and not falling behind.
Okay.
In that study that we'll get access to, or that information, on some of the slides that you didn't show, I noticed that there's like different impact fees for different types of usages, but they seem very similar, like a nursing home versus assisted living, and also like even a church is listed out as having different impact fees. Why do we do that, and how is that determined?
So, good question. It's largely, you're trying to model the fee based on the impact created by a specific class of user. And so typically you try to divide out, is there something that's different between these two types of users? The consultant that we have used in the past had a different set of folks that they looked at and said, this is a little bit different than that, and so we should charge a little bit different fee. I don't know that our current consultant is going to have that same model, so you may see some changes there. I tend to agree with you. I looked at it again as I was putting this together. Some of these seem kind of similar.
Yeah.
It seems like we could maybe group some of them for convenience, and so I think we may look at that.
And would that be the same with the parks? Because I noticed there's many, many classifications that don't pay any impact fees to parks.
So that's based on who potentially has impacts on park services. That's typically residential users. We saw recently that Coeur d'Alene adopted a park impact fee for their hotel spaces, largely driven out of their downtown because those have an impact on some of the
Yeah.
downtown parks. It's not as clear cut here. We're looking at that. I don't know that that would be our recommendation to do that going forward, but we are looking at that.
Does the state in some way drive what we're allowed to charge,
Yes.
so they would say, like, you're not allowed
So
to charge
the
impact
state wouldn't
fees
say that.
to-
You have to be able to base it on essentially you have a consultant that looks at engineering information and also financial impact, and they sort of model what is the impact from this type of use on this type of facility, and they try to drive that into the calculation. And so it's based on what does the math essentially tell you, what's the impact.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So basically, we have to base it on something that's justifiable quantitatively, right? We can't just base it on because we feel like that's kind of the state guideline in terms of that, correct?
Yeah, it's based on, we need to be able to quantify this use has this amount of impact, and so we need to have them replace their increment that they're using up of that facility. So if it's a park of 10 acres per thousand, we know that this house is using up this increment of that park space, we need to have them pay a fee to offset how much they're using of that space,
I
so
guess-
that we can provide the same level of service
More of
going
my
forward.
point was, we're looking at parks that can always use more money to make our city better, and there are many, many classifications that don't pay any impact fees to parks. And so perhaps that's an opportunity for us to help that.
Yeah, the
that
consultants
area.
will bring that analysis forward, and it would be a good time for, good opportunity for comments and input.
And I agree with you, so I was just trying to clarify
Yeah,
for myself,
okay.
that, okay, make sure I understand the process, so.
Anyone else? Thanks, Warren. Anyone wishing to testify?
We do not.
You're not going to rebut anything, are you, Warren?
Oh, no.
Thank you. Close the public hearing. Council?
Like this one's fairly simple. I mean, a lot of the fees are, I wouldn't say set in stone, but are based off of plans that we drafted out years and years ago, the wastewater, water reclamation specifically, water plans, solid waste, et cetera. So I think those models still appear to be functional. We're still able to pay the bills we need to pay, and are adequate for the projects that have been identified well in advance. The rest of the stuff is still, for the most part, below what the rate of inflation has been, so I'm fairly satisfied with that. So I would recommend that we go forward.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Anytime a fee increase is less than inflation, I think that reflects pretty well on what we're doing. So.
I agree.
We're going to need a motion to bring back the resolution.
Move to approve the, where are we? Fee hearing for fiscal year 2025, and direct staff to bring a resolution to a future council meeting for approval.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Warren. Next public hearing is the 17th and Catherine vacation. With that, I'll open the public hearing.
I'm not as tall as Warren. Ethan Porter, one of the planners of the city. Good evening, Mayor Jacobson and city council members. I'm going to present the 17th and Catherine vacation. And so the owner of the property asking for this vacation is Chad Johnson. Connie Kruger here tonight to represent this request, and they are requesting your approval to vacate the rights-of-way that are adjacent to their address, 116 West 17th Avenue. And this will include 5 feet of right-of-way along 17th Avenue and 7.5 feet of right-of-way along North Catherine Street. So looking at the map here, you can see kind of that location hatched out in red. There you can see along Catherine Street, 17th, the proximity to Spokane Street. Essentially, they're going to be mirroring south of 17th Avenue, just on the southeastern side there of that intersection. So you can see the right-of-way then lines up. We did it previously for that property south of them across 17th Avenue, and they're just requesting the same to do the same. So here's kind of what they provided for the Exhibit A3 in the staff report. Kind of shows a little bit more some of that dimensioning of Catherine Street and 17th Avenue, kind of show you what the dimensions will be with that right-of-way vacation. Looking at it through the staff report and staff comments, which you can probably read in the staff report, but by vacating the proposed areas, it may provide more flexibility in site design, giving them more space, more functionality, and usability of the property. And then it's about 0.1 miles from bus stop or bus route the CityLink bus route, and it's approximately 0.6 miles from the Post Falls Library, just to kind of put it in perspective as well. Staff has no concerns with the proposed vacation as outlined in the staff report, and then the requested vacation matches the approved vacation, like I mentioned, that occurred south of them across the street, 17th Avenue. And then the existing rights-of-way, the widths, kind of like what you've seen in Exhibit A3, does exceed the minimum standards for the roadway. So with that, agencies were notified for comments, see if there's any issues with that. Of these agencies that we sent out, we received 4 back. School district is neutral, KCFR, they're going to comment at time of development on site, and then ITD had no comment, and then Yellowstone Pipeline Company said no impact and no comment. So there was nothing of alarm raised there with the agencies, and so here kind of gives the vacation there again, and I will stand for questions you have from staff.
Any questions for Ethan?
Yeah, I'd
Good,
like
right?
to know, why was the right-of-way larger than the minimum standards? Did our standards change over time? What's the history behind that?
I'm going to let the city engineer, Rob Paulus, address that.
Good evening, council members. So in that area of town, that's dates back pre-1970s, and back then we had a lot of very wide rights-of-way, and as time has developed, we've gone with narrower roadways. If you went back into even the 1980s, you would see there's a number of streets where when they put in curb and gutter, you had a 40-foot wide road from curb face to curb face. Today, we utilize 32-foot wide roadways, curb face to curb face, to allow for parking. We still can accommodate the stormwater swales on both sides plus sidewalk, and so 65 feet in today's age is more appropriate for handling what we need for roads without having to have all that extra right-of-way, which in this area was 75, 80 feet, depending upon where you were at. If you were to go into the far down here in the southern part of town, there's even some old residential streets which are about 100 feet wide in right-of-way. It's just what they were doing with planning back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then even in the 1970s. They thought, provide as much right-of-way as possible, and then build your roads and then narrow them down if you need to.
So I imagine there are many properties in kind of a similar situation where we have right-of-ways larger than what we need.
There are, however, from an engineering perspective and trying to keep an eye on our utilities, we always want to take a look at what is that function of the roadway long-term in the plans that we have. Also, do we have our utilities in place and making sure we reserve enough rights-of-way and easements that we can take care of what we have today and what we anticipate we need tomorrow. And we don't want to get, it's easy to say, yes, you can get rid of right-of-way today, but once you get rid of it, you can never get it back. This is one of those areas where, from an engineering perspective, we've got the utilities in place. We don't ever see a need for going with a wider than a 32-foot wide road. We could even go a little bit wider than that and still accommodate. Catherine Street is already vacated further to the south, so it doesn't go very much further to the south. It goes up to Poline Avenue, then terminates, and then east-west, it's only a few short blocks on 17th.
Okay, and I believe the report says this doesn't have any impact on our utilities. We don't have to move anything because our stuff is in the street.
That is correct. The utilities are already in place in this area, anticipating that with this vacation that they will want to do some type of development on it. They would be able to provide utilities to that site. It just would mean putting in the service stubs that are needed to serve however they want to develop that land.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Joe?
So 10 years from now, some developer buys the entire block and wants to have a change of use, maybe do something commercial on Spokane Street, so we want them to put in curb and gutter and swales and sidewalks and all that kind of stuff. Does this vacation still allow enough space for all that?
For the residential roadway standard that's on 17th Avenue and on Catherine Street, yes.
And it won't be 10 years from now. I mean, if they develop it now, they're going to have to do that.
Right.
So it's not only if they develop it 10 years later, change use, they're going to have to put that in now if they develop it.
Yeah, it's what's for the one plot, so I guess my thought
Yeah.
was, so the rest of the block gets developed later, and this has already been vacated, is it going, then they'll all expect to have it vacated also, so is that going to affect our future need for curb gutter,
From the
swale,
hypothetical
sidewalk?
standpoint of that, Counselor Malloy, if you start looking at redevelopment of an entire block and increasing the zoning on that block for what type of land uses are allowed, you may get into a situation where you look at redevelopment of the entire area and then you tell the developer that if you're gonna redevelop that block and you need to have additional on-street parking, how are you gonna get that angled parking in? You're gonna have to dedicate additional rights of way. It's easier to do on a block-by-block basis than on an individual lot to
So
get
it's-
additional rights of way if you had to redevelop the area.
So it's, you just said earlier that, it's easy to give away right away, but you can never get it back. But what you're saying now is we can get
Well,
it back.
no, when you change the parameter to starting to look at, if they were to come in on a block basis, we could start looking, because they're now taking, in this block here, you've got 8 homes. If you just had to get one home at a time and deal with 8 different property owners, it gets really tough and expensive to buy that land. And also, the homes that are there are gonna be at a certain distance based upon what our setbacks are from the right-of-way as they're established. But if you're taking that block and completely redeveloping it, taking it down to bare earth and rebuilding, you can then start looking at that block and say, okay, what does it need to be to work with what are the needs of the proposed development, higher density, and what do they need to give up in order to accommodate that and work with the public's needs?
Thank you.
Is that better
No,
explained?
it does. That answers the
Okay.
question.
I have maybe a silly question, I'm sorry. So we've purchased rights of way, right? And we have to pay for that land. But when we vacate land to give right of way to a citizen, that land is just given? Am I understanding this process?
When we vacate land, the determination is that it's no longer needed for the public interest, so it goes back to the property that adjoins it. So when the developer comes in and does a new subdivision,
Mhm.
they dedicate and they give those rights of ways to the city freely in most cases.
Gotcha.
If we have a road project in the area and we don't have enough right of way, we will go in and we will purchase
Purchase that.
those rights of way.
Like we did a few weeks
Yeah.
ago.
So
Right, okay.
whereas they're not paying us to get this right of way back when we declare that it's no longer needed, it does go back on the tax roll as property that's being,
Taxable.
property taxes on
Okay,
it.
okay, thank you.
That's a very simplistic, and you can get better answers than that.
That's
if you-
probably about as much as I can handle, so
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Any other questions for Ethan or Rob? Thank you.
You're welcome.
You done, Ethan?
Yep, thanks.
Anyone wishing to testify, Rhiannon?
No.
With that, I'll close the public hearing. Council, how would you like to act?
Move to approve the 17th and Catherine vacation file number VAC-24-1.
Second.
Motion seconds, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Stigleader,
Aye.
Walker.
Motion passes, thank you. Next up tonight is unfinished business, returning ordinances and resolution, and the first is a resolution authorizing use of foregone tax authority.
I would move to approve the resolution authorizing use of foregone tax authority.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
No.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Next up is fiscal year 2025 budget ordinance.
I move to place the ordinance fiscal year 2025 budget ordinance on its first and only reading by title only while under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
No.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Mr. Harrington.
An ordinance entitled the Annual Appropriation Ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2024, appropriating the sum of $159,616,812 to defray the expenses and liabilities of the city of Post Falls for said fiscal year, authorizing a levy of sufficient tax upon the taxable property and specifying the objects and purposes for which said appropriations are made.
I move to approve the ordinance fiscal year 2025 budget ordinance and to direct the clerk to assign the appropriate number and that it be published by summary only.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Stigleader.
No.
Shove.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next up tonight is the alcoholic beverage fees.
Hello. So tonight, we're just going to answer any questions that you might have regarding the alcoholic beverage fees. We brought this forward this summer. Had a conversation during a workshop about the different types of fees that we charge. We are limited under state code for the fees that we do charge. There are 4 primary fees. It's wine, beer, on-premise, off-premise. And when you look at those, we went out and looked at the other cities in Idaho. The only one that was charging a different fee on those 4 main categories was Rathdrum, and they charged $2.50 more on the liquor and wine, and $50 less on the wine to go. And I think that's just simply what they did when they adopted it. We could actually charge a few more dollars because the state increased their fee a few years ago, and we did not increase our fee on the liquor wine fee back then. And so I think Rathdrum, they're kind of like us. They adopted these a while ago. They haven't looked at them to see that they are at either the max amount that you can charge, or that is just maybe what they negotiated at the time. I'm happy to answer any questions. These fees should be relative to the actual process. We talked a lot about like DUIs and what the police do to enforce after. But these fees, kind of like what Warren was referring to when he was talking about the fees that were on the resolution earlier, they should be related back to what staff is doing in relation to issuing the licensure for those fees.
Questions for Shelley?
But we can answer questions on either one. I'm just stating the fee we should be able to base our fee on what our actual work is.
So, I guess comments. One, I know we're entering into a new budget and we need to pass something. So, in this case, I would say we need to pass these. However, for me, I haven't been smart enough to come up with a better system, but I still think there's a way to more fairly distribute the fees based on some factor of volume. Super One is selling a lot more beer than Republic, for example. So if that's causing a weight on our police department for increased alcohol-related crime or whatever, it should reflect that and not unduly burden a small business with the same burden as a large one that's contributing ostensibly a lot more to the problem. So for me personally, I would rather this topic not die yet, but for the purposes of having to have something in for the budget going forward, then
Council President, so the fees are annually renewed in February. So you do have a little bit of time with these fees. What we adopt tonight, unless you're a new business applying for one of these fees, you're not going to pay this fee again until February. So most of our existing, or all of our existing licensures would have till February. So you do have time.
Does anybody else have concerns on this still too, or am I the only one?
No, I guess I hear 2 things, right? That it's based on state direction and state statutes, but then also it should be based on the amount of time that it actually takes our municipality to work through these licensures and and give them out. So I think to be a better advocate and supporter of the numbers that we have placed, I'd ask for maybe a breakdown of how long does it actually take to collect this information, how long does it take to submit the background checks or look through that. And then if it is supposed to be based on that number of how many man hours or what it's actually costing the city to do, I think that would be a good place to start. I agree with you, but I think that there are 2 logics that we're trying to follow here, which is like we can either go down the volume route, but it doesn't change the fact that getting the liquor license or the wine to go or whatever is going to take the same amount of time no matter if you're Super One or the Republic. And so if we could have more definitive evidence of what that price tag for the city actually is, then maybe we could talk about it in more real terms. If the volume isn't an option, because I hear what you're saying and I agree, like if you're a smaller business, then the price, it would be nicer if the price could be smaller, but if you're saying that that's not how the fees are determined, then it would be nice to see like an actual breakdown of how we're getting those fees, not just what the state says we can charge.
And we can do that. Just to let you know, one thing about how we do the fees that might go against kind of what you're seeking. is if you have a nonprofit that applies for a fee, we have to do a background check on every one of the board members, or however they identify. Usually it's called a board, so if you're the senior center, you have a board. So it may be more expensive for the folks that you would prefer not have to pay a higher fee. But we can bring those numbers back for you.
And I guess to add to the conversation, I suppose, if the whole sole purpose of the fee is to cover the cost of issuing the permit, then we're basically just issuing a permit to issue it. And so it costs $200 to issue a permit, so we go through the process, charge them $200. And then I guess I'm not really sure what that accomplishes if they've already been, I know that some people.
You have to meet all the requirements under the state code, so that's what we're looking at. We're doing the background check on the business and the owners of the business. And again, if it's like a nonprofit, it would be background checks on all the board members. You have to be you can't be within certain number of miles or feet of a school. There's a number of things that we look at when you do a background check when you apply for a license.
Well, and in theory, and I know that it's happened that people have lied on their applications, but in theory, the state and the county have already done this, right? By the time it gets to the city?
In theory, yes.
So that's another.
I can tell you we found things.
Right,
that-
no,
yeah.
I believe you, but I guess then I'll go back to,
I agree, though, that I want to have more conversations about this. Yeah.
okay, so we got that, I guess.
I was sorry to have to miss the workshop on it, but it seems, after looking at this, it seems like kind of a silly sequence of hoops that somebody has to jump through, getting 3 different licenses from different entities, and they're all doing background checks, and there's a lot of duplication of work going on here. And I feel like there's got to be a much better way to do this, but it seems like one of those things that has to be solved at the state level, because again, what we're doing is dictated by state law. And so I don't see that we really have any great option for redesigning how this works right now.
I have no issues if you want to have further discussion, but I have no issues leaving them the way they are. To my knowledge, it's the first time this has come up in my 26 years. So to me, I understand what you're saying, but are we creating a mountain out of a molehill? So I can go either way. So whatever you'd like staff to do, let them know, we'll bring it back.
I'll just comment that I agree with you, Mayor, on, I'm always one for more information, and if it makes the rest of the council more comfortable in what they're voting on, I'm very much in favor of that. I think what I do like about our designations of usage type, it does make sense to me that even at a greater volume, a grocery store is going to have a less impact on our public use than a private, consume on-site type of business. And so the volume part, I don't think is a very good argument, the way I understand it, but I would be in favor of bringing it back.
In that
to discussion.
it's a bigger impact to the city if you drink at an establishment as opposed to drinking at home?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think, Josh, you want to weigh in?
I'm agree with you and Councilor Ziegler. I could go for more conversation, but at the same time, it is what it is, and I can see.
Kenny?
I think it's always good to review, so I'd be in favor of getting more information and
Okay.
seeing what we find.
I think that gives us good direction.
Perfect.
So.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item up is critical materials ordinance.
I move to place the ordinance, Critical Materials Ordinance, on its first and only reading by title only while under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Rhiannon, please take the roll.
Stigleter,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Motion passes.
An ordinance of the City of Post Falls, Kootenai County, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, relating to the regulation of critical materials at fixed facilities, providing for the protection of the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer from potential sources of contamination from materials handling and storage at facilities located over or adjacent to the aquifer, providing for proper use of secondary containment systems at fixed facilities that use, store, manufacture, or handle critical materials, providing requirements specified in Title III of the Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act of 1986, providing for associated definitions, providing that remaining sections of Post Falls City Code shall remain in effect, providing for severability, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval, and publication according to law.
I move to approve the ordinance, Critical Materials Ordinance, and to direct the clerk to assign the appropriate number and that it be published by summary only.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Shove,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item tonight is new business. We have one item, deferred impact fees for attainable and affordable housing.
Mayor and Council. Bob Seal, Community Development Director, City of Post Falls. So, in previous discussions with some of the private developers that do affordable housing, I think it was brought up actually when Miracle on Britain and Hayden Homes were visiting and doing a workshop with you guys. The idea behind collecting impact fees for affordable or attainable housing at the CO phase versus at the building permit phase, up front, at the back end versus at the front end. Per statute, we have to collect them at a point, and that can be determined. In the code changes that we're proposing, we're adding definitions for attainable and affordable housing. Looking at for home ownership, and this is kind of the example for this one is the Miracle on Britain. That would be affordable to persons making 120% or less of the area median income, and those would also have to be deed restricted. So this is all related to deed restricted properties. When it was a for rental project, these ones fit more along the lines of the affordable housing projects that occasionally get built within the city using LIHTC funding and sources like that, such as the Whitewater projects that have been built here. And that's when there are at least 25% of the units are dedicated to 80% AMI or less. Within the rest of this is a change in a slide compared to what was in your packet. We made quite a slight modification to the draft after I had submitted the PowerPoint and such, so I added this just for making sure we had a clarification. Nothing of substance. It was already in your packet. But it was just kind of indicating that we would be collecting it at the certificate of occupancy phase. And we added and made a change under B as the piece that I didn't have previously, just noting that no building permit, certificate of occupancy, or other city approval will be issued for development until that is paid. And this is just, again, kind of in order to get projects rolling easier, less upfront costs for them, and they can collect it when they go to either sell the project or finish the project. And that's essentially all.
So Bob, this would basically be a benefit to the developers then as opposed to the homeowner, the eventual homeowner.
Correct, but it does make it possible for the developers to be able to bring forward some of these projects that are deed restricted, in the sense that, you know, they have to come up with a lot of money up front in order to start it off. And this just is one of those pieces that was identified as a potential low-hanging fruit for the city to help support some of the lower or the cheaper, the more affordable, attainable housing. This is something that is also done in other Idaho cities.
I guess I'm not opposed to it, and I'm a supporter of projects going on, Miracle in Britain. I just don't see it as a huge cost savings, but, you know, I do understand pay later as opposed to pay now.
And we collect the same amount of money.
Right.
It just happens to be at a different time.
I just don't see it as a huge, as a big money saver, but perhaps it will be an impetus to get people to do it.
So as a potential risk then, so a developer comes in, says they want to have this affordable housing project. They're allowed then to defer their impact fees. They get pretty deep into construction. As a recession, they go bankrupt. Then what? We haven't collected the fees. They've already started.
Well, if they go bankrupt and that building just sits there, that's not any impact to the system anyways. And that fee will still be held for whenever somebody decides to pick that building up and finish it. If, for an example, if somebody, a lot of the times permits will expire, and during construction even, and if somebody were to come in and pick that up as, you know, purchase it, and decide, hey, I'm not going to do this deed restricted, at which point when they're getting that permit reissued, we could then ask for the impact fees at that point. So,
I guess in my head, I still have, you know, recurring nightmares about, you know, the property in the river. Of course, that was never going to be affordable housing in the first place, but, you know, that got all started, and then it's been tied up in bankruptcies and courts and everything for, what, 15, 20 years now? And so there's that period of time where you know, the people of Post Falls didn't have that money for other pending projects that,
Well, if there's no impact, you know, because there's no people living there, there's no businesses operating there, technically, you know, there's no additional impact to our system, and we'll be collecting it at a later date.
there may be some if, say, roads are put in, and you've got some buildings that are, you know, mostly complete but unoccupied, and so then I'm assuming that's gonna be some burden on the police department to look out for squatters and vandals and all those sorts of things, so I don't think anything has no impact. I agree it's probably minimal.
Sorry, that
But
matters, absolutely.
I guess you're answering the question though is, and I'm looking at the rest of staff too, does anybody see any unreasonable risk here by shifting the payment and something should go awry with the development? I'm not seeing anybody nodding their heads, so thank you.
I guess the scenario that I have more in my head, and pardon me, is there an assurance from the city at the time of permitting that any number of these dwelling units, rental or for sale, will meet these qualifications? So we defer the payment at permit, and then we get to occupancy, and they're like, well, the market is what it is, and we're not gonna do that.
Right, so if they're doing deed restricted, we would be requiring them to provide us with the documentation regarding the deed restriction at the time of permitting, to prove that.
That is
So,
irreversible, like that they can't undo when they decide to go sell it?
I mean, honestly, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could.
Yeah,
They could
okay.
probably turn around and be like,
Yeah.
never mind, we changed hands, we changed ownerships, we changed whatever, changed our
Yeah.
direction, at which point, yes, we collect them. But, you know, part of it is, you know, we're trying to encourage it. We're trying to provide, here's a little carrot for developers to
Yeah.
consider this route. And for the most part, we're not gonna, I don't think we're gonna get a lot. We'll get some.
Okay,
And
yeah.
even as part of some developments I've heard, I've been talking to some other developers, and they're aiming to do, like, say, 30 homes, and within those 30 homes, they wanna do 2 as deed restricted. You know, so it's not the majority of the housing that we're gonna be dealing with. And that's also one of the reasons why I'm not recommending pushing this out for any other types of, you know, housing developments.
You kind of touched on my other question about rentals. So the impact fee deferment for the rentals are only for the units that will meet that qualification, not for the entire project, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do think then that 25% is a little bit low.
Most of our affordable housing developments that we've seen in town are 100%. This, however, encourages somebody to only do 25%.
Yeah.
It still gives them an opportunity
Okay.
to receive some kind of benefit to putting in the 25%.
I think, I don't know why I have heartburn about it either, but something I also want to be helpful and give carrots. It just seems like perhaps deferring this payment really isn't big enough to put it into state or into city like ordinance. Like I don't know. I'm so sorry, Mr. Seal.
I've got a question for legal. So, you make a statement that we're going to give them the carrot so they can build the affordable housing, and in theory, there really isn't an impact until such time as they get a certificate of occupancy. Legally, if someone challenges us that it's not building affordable housing, and they say, well, wait a minute, we're building houses, but we're not gonna have an impact until their CO is approved. Legally, are we gonna be okay? Do you understand my question?
Maybe, see if I understand it correctly.
Want me to try it again?
I can never say that we're always going to be okay, just as a blanket caveat. But I don't see a whole lot of risk here. Currently in the code, there is some language about other city approvals. And really, this is just changing the timing of when it's paid, not
I just
whether
don't
or
wanna
not it's
see a
paid.
situation come up where, you know, people are coming in to pay their impact fees and with a building permit fee and say, wait a minute, they're not paying theirs until later. Why are we paying ours up front?
Well, and having it in code allows us something to
So
point to and say why.
that's my question. So doing it this way, okay,
And,
that's all I care about.
and we're not the only ones. Again,
Yeah.
I noted that other Idaho cities are doing this, so.
Yeah.
Which cities?
Well, I know Boise is.
Okay.
I'll
Thank
just
you.
stop with that.
Just off, okay. that one down south.
Any other questions of Bob?
I guess, do we know if those other cities have had success in actually spurring affordable housing development with such a change like this?
Is it about, I honestly, I can't tell you. You know, it's one of those things. However, this is something that was specifically spoken to with the Miracle on Britain group, that this would be helpful for them because they are still building their kitty worth of, you know, for their development
Fundraising,
project.
yeah.
You know, if they are able to kind of shave off just little bits, you know, $13,000 per build up front, they're able to start maybe one more than they would have been able to. And then being able to collect that money for those sales, and they're able to build the next and the next. So it just is, sometimes it's just that seconds and inches type of idea.
Do we have a process by which we could allow them to do that on an individual project basis instead of making it an ordinance?
No, because it specifically says in this code is that it has to be collected essentially at the building permit phase, prior to building permit being released.
So if we approve this, if council approves this, and it doesn't work out,
We can always come.
Also have, ask to have it changed back or eliminated. Any questions, Bob?
Yeah, let me ask, what do we do right now when a building permit expires? Do we require them to pay impact fees a second time when they get another building permit?
No, no. I mean, if it's, so impact fees are based on the use of that parcel at that time of collection. If they've gone through I haven't seen any, during my tenure here, I haven't seen any projects just go to defunct during the process. I have elsewhere, but do you want to say something?
So we actually had this come up once, a couple years ago. We had a developer pulled site development plans because they wanted to beat an increased impact fees. They didn't end up closing out those permits, and so they went defunct. We put them on notice, your permits are about to lapse, you need to come in and make sure these things stay active. They didn't do that. They went defunct. When they come back in, they're gonna have to pay the increased impact fees, because at the time that you're submitting is when you're paying that fee. That's when your fee is locked in, is at the time that our code spells out. And so we do have that happen very, very rarely, but it does happen occasionally.
So is that they're paying the difference between what was paid before and the new impact fee, or
So
they're paying
in
the
this
whole new
instance,
impact fee?
this is like 4 iterations ago at this point, so they're gonna pay a significantly increased impact fee.
They never actually paid the impact fee, which is why I
Yeah.
thought that, but yes, yeah. But they were trying to be grandfathered in under a cheaper fee.
Flip the mic, Bob.
I thought that I could yell. Yeah, no, and that's a good example. I mean, that stuff happens a lot. We do have people trying to beat the new fees, and we allow for them to submit and go through the process. And some of those permits have expired because they were jumping the gun. They weren't ready, and they just never made it through. And when they do come in with their permits, even if they try and reuse essentially the same plans they had before, they will have to pay today's fees, not 2 years ago fees. Under this, you know, I guess it would be the same type of thing if they came in saying, hey, this is what I'm gonna do, can you pay my fee later? In this scenario, we would issue the building permit. Again, they'd have to pay for all the other fees. There's still a lot of other fees they have to pay. But we would still be able to get them if they failed to complete it, potentially.
So if we collect the impact fee generally at the time when we issue the building permit, how is it that
That's the
people can
question
get
he's
building
asking.
permits without having paid the fee?
They can't. Today, they
I don't know
don't.
what our process is.
We were just talking about when their building permit expires, right?
So there's 2 different scenarios. Building permit application expires, say, before they even complete their process of getting their building permit. They just put it in for review, we do
Okay.
the review, but we never issue it because they haven't paid all the fees, because they're not ready to roll on it. The other instance that, again, is more rare is we go through the review process, we go through the building permit process, they pay all their building permits currently. Actually, there's a restaurant just did that. In order to not have their permit expire, they went ahead and paid all their fees, and should they decide, they've got 6 months granted to get going on it, because they do expire. But if they failed to, if it expired in 6 months, we'd give them all their money back, but then if they came back and said, okay, never mind, now we want to do it a year later, they'd have to pay all the current fees.
Okay.
Okay.
I understand the technical things. I've got a couple questions about the language here. I like the idea of trying to encourage more attainable housing in the city. We definitely need more of that. I think everyone can see that it's difficult for people who grew up here to actually buy a house here. And I think we can have a role in trying to encourage the kind of development we want to see. I'm a little uncomfortable with putting the deed restrictions into city ordinance because it feels like it's not really a market solution. It's artificially restricting the value of an asset. And the deed restrictions are writing in, as I understand it, a particular nonprofit organization into the deed that you have to go through to buy and sell that particular property. And this seems like a good experiment to me. I'm happy if developers want to try this out. I'm a little more hesitant about trying to put that into city ordinance to say we're going to encourage more of this, when this seems to be a kind of a new thing that's being tried out. And I think we should wait to see how the deed restrictions actually play out a little bit before we decide that we want to encourage more of them.
The rental pieces are deed restricted anyways, just as a note. I mean, those ones are, if they are meeting HUD requirements, they're ultimately deed restricted for 30 or 40 years. And I can understand
Right.
that, with the deed restrictions, it's a new thing for our city. It's not necessarily a new thing statewide or nationwide. And, yeah, but it does put that cap on it, does hold it.
Yeah.
Like you had talked about.
If we're going to do something like this, I would prefer that we remove the requirement that it's restricted and just say we can do this for housing that is attainable for 120% of AMI. And that way, if somebody's building, say, something that falls under the tiny home or cottage home kind of form factor, that's going to be under, under 300,000 or so, that would be affordable for 120% AMI, somewhere around there. Then we can say, let's encourage those, and those don't necessarily need to be deed encumbered because the market value of those is just going to be affordable.
I think that there's different ways of looking at it. I struggle with us trying, who's making that determination that is considered attainable, who's making that call, because yes, they submit certain valuations for the buildings that they're constructing and what the house is going to be worth or what it costs to construct, and that's their estimate. And we have certain valuations that we assign to it based on building code data that we're able to utilize. So I struggle with that just because. We'll get into arguments as to whether somebody is or is not considered attainable or achievable, or affordable. So that's my only piece with that is I can't. The permitting end of it would cause a lot of complications.
Well, I think we have that problem now, don't we? Which word was used? Affordable. The word affordable is not defined in the ordinance. So how would we even make that determination right now?
Well, we don't right now, and so that, this was affordable. This is how we've defined it under this ordinance.
Yeah, but the word affordable is not defined. Like, what does it mean to
Right.
be affordable, right?
And that is true. And absolutely, I can understand that. I mean, there is an affordable definition when it comes to like HUD. They have an
Yeah.
affordable housing
If
definition.
your total housing
Ours,
costs are
again, that's
30%.
yeah,
of your
that's why
income rate.
our definition is focusing on that attainable housing. You're right. And that's what we were looking to define there was what is attainable, because we wanted to try and lump these two together because 120% AMI is not, by definition, affordable. It just happens to be within our area attainable and or achievable. When it comes to those smaller homes, part of the impact fee update that we are looking at or will be looking at is basing those impact fees on size of the building as opposed to just strictly, hey, it's a single family. You pay the same amount as, your 4,000 square foot house pays the same as that 700 square foot house. So we are looking to try and tie that into it in some way,
Yeah.
defensible. So.
Yeah, I think that definitely needs to be changed. But I think we still have an issue with the way this is written as, say, a developer says, hey, these are going to be affordable. Like, how do we judge? Do they actually fall into this category or not if we haven't defined what affordable means? And if we're going to use the definition of 30% of your gross pay is enough to cover the total housing costs, right? Usually HUD uses the mortgage and PMI and utilities, and they kind of roll that into one.
The 120% of the AMI currently, I believe it falls around a $514,000 house. Again, the focus was kind of on some of these deed restricted ones, so that as things continue to rise, you know, this $500,000 house isn't going to be $700,000 house in 3 years, like, you know, some situations saw. It will grow at a very slower but still steady rate. So.
Another question I had on the language is, it says affordable to persons making 120% or less of AMI. AMI is a household measure. That should say to households making 120% or less, right? So we're not comparing one person's salary to a household income statistic.
I would actually ask legal if you guys have any comments on that, if that is something that you'd rather.
I mean,
have
so
it defined as.
this is a draft ordinance.
Yep.
We can make those kind of tooling things. I don't have any qualms about it either way, as far as persons versus household income. Whatever works
Yeah, households can make sense.
best. So if,
So we don't want somebody saying like, well, my household income is this high, but my personal income is this much, and so therefore I qualify or something, right?
no, we can,
makes
we can work on the definitions.
Could you also
and
see
bring
if you can come
something
up with a definition for Randy on affordable?
And it might just be as easy as removing affordable.
Warren.
Homes.
So state law, the impact fee statute does have a definition of affordable housing. It's tied to giving credits, and there's a reason we didn't use it, it's because if you're giving a credit for affordable housing, you have to backfill that out of your budget somehow. That's not something we're prepared to do today, and it's tied to 80%. So we used a different term because we didn't want to confuse it with a state term that's already defined for impact fees, and so we went with attainable housing and attached it to a higher number because it's just used for different purposes. We didn't want to cause additional confusion.
Right.
Hopefully that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that makes sense, and I think that is a reason why we have to explicitly define words like that when we use them, because there are definitions out there maybe attached to state law or attached to HUD, and if we're going to have it in city ordinance, you should be able to look at the city ordinance and know exactly what it means. The last change that I would like to make to it is to strike the rental clause. I know there's a lot of concern from citizens about lower value apartments right now, and I would love to see the housing needs assessment survey done, and then decide, you know, do we actually need more of that or not. I know that encouraging homeownership is very important, and everybody seems to be on the same page for that. And so I would be happy trying to do something where we encourage homeownership for starter homes, for attainable housing, if it's an ownership-based model in particular. I'm less comfortable with giving exceptions for doing the sort of low-value apartment builds. That's my feedback.
I was gonna say, and I think that you know, there's always the possibility too that we end up finding smaller apartment builds that may try it and attempt to do some kind of deed restriction, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I would agree with Randy in removing the rentals. So if we're talking about editing the ordinance tonight, if that sounds like what's on the table, I would be in favor of that as well.
I think I would move based on the discussion. I don't know how full our workshop calendar is. But to table this issue until such time as we can have a workshop on it and hash some of these issues out.
I would second that.
Do we need a motion? I mean, this is for
Yeah,
information.
I think the motion is to table it. Motion and a second.
Oh, that was an action item. Okay, I'm sorry.
And I did word that poorly, so I would move. Please, let's move.
If you did move it, I would second it.
All right, I appreciate that.
We're going to assume that we have a motion and a second. Actually, we have a motion and a second to table this to a future date. To allow time for workshop, more information to be brought forward. Motion second. Roll call, please.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Bob. Next item up tonight is citizens' issues, and this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council regarding city-related issues that are not on the agenda. Anyone wishing to speak, come forward. Seeing none. Next item up is administrative staff report, streets department report. Ross.
I'm going to adjust it. Okay, good evening, Mayor, council members. Ross Junkin, Public Works Maintenance Manager. We're nearing the end of summer. Not trying to put a downer on the meeting, but I thought it'd be a good time to come and give an update where we've been this summer and what we're looking forward to as fall and winter start to approach. Chip seal contract this summer. We were able to get down 5.3 miles, which you can see is about 2.7% of the city. It seems every year the amount that we're able to do for the dollars that we have continues to reduce. We're looking for ways to make a little bit more, make our dollars stretch. So we'll be looking at that for next year and trying to get that out a little earlier. That's one of our tools. See if we can get out early enough. Maybe we can get some more competition, get some better pricing. In-house, our paving crews, we accomplished 1.25 lane miles of new asphalt. That consists of grinding off 2 inches of the existing roadways, which we identified through our paving assessments, which need rehab. So we contract that work out. That's a big, huge grinding machine. They come off, they take 2 inches off, and then we follow behind them. We clean it up with our sweepers, and then we put back 2 inches and finish it off and get it ready for painting, which is hopefully coming very soon. Painting. We have increased the number of gallons of paint that we have to put down each year, probably the last 3 years. I think the totes that it comes in are about 225 gallons per tote, and we've increased it almost annually for the last couple of years. So we're up to 2,000 gallons a year now. We've done our stenciling, which is all the arrows, crosswalks, bike symbols and whatnot. The long lining, so the striping and the skip striping, is coming. We've been waiting for the delivery of our new striper truck, which they've continually pushed back on us. We're hoping it's going to be here this week, potentially next. And at that point, we get trained on it, and then we can go out and do it. We still have a fallback of our old truck, which we're limping along, and we think we can get it through this year. The challenge that we're up against right now is temperature. The cooler it starts getting, the longer it takes to dry, and that's a problem for our motoring public as they get it spun up on their car, and nobody likes that. Sweeping. We do get quite a few calls on sweeping each year. When's my street going to get swept? I haven't seen it. So we have 2 sweepers, and we do about 1,000 lane miles a year. That covers all the city, whether it's arterial, residential. We hit everything at least 5 times a year. So every street, some more often than that. So when they call in and say we haven't seen the street sweeper out, when we actually have software that tracks our street sweeper, so we know where it's been and when it's been and if it's gone by their house or not, so we can let the residents know. Sometimes they don't see it because there's 10 vehicles parked in front of their house during the mornings when it came by, and there's not a lot we can do about that.
I was really impressed by that number. I don't know much about street sweeping, but we do the whole city 5 times in 1 year. Kudos to them. I think that's great.
Yeah, and that's from May to September. Those are the times that we can actually get it done. When it starts freezing, you can't get it off the ground,
Sure.
so it doesn't make any sense to do that.
Quick question on street sweeping.
Mhm.
Not long ago, we were having constant reliability problems with the newest sweeper at the time. Are those behind us now?
I would say there are always going to be issues with keeping street sweepers in service. That's kind of the nature of the beast with street sweeping. They are constantly, they constantly need attention. Things break down on them quite often. A lot of them are just wear parts. They go bad every year or two, and we have to replace them. So it is back up and running. That's one of the reasons we have 2. So,
Right.
So when one goes down, we're still in business, and we can keep going.
But they're both operating now to
One
to
of them,
to a degree that is acceptable? maybe?
Yes and no. We just sent one. It's the older one in for a wear item that has worn out. It's a liner that's inside the hopper. And it came back, and it wasn't quite up to our satisfaction, the repair that was done on it. And it actually started to come apart a little bit, so it went right back. And so we're hoping to get that back this week, and we can get them both back in. So things like that happen. The quality of the work, the repair work the specialized work sometimes isn't as good as we'd like it to be. Little note on staff training. You may or may not have heard about our, we have a program called Road Scholar, and we put our staff through it. It teaches them a lot of the technical skills that they do. A lot of they even take math classes to help learn to calculate how much asphalt to put down on the ground. And they go through 2 different levels of it. One's Road Scholar and one's Road Master, which is that next level. 10 of our 18 staff members in streets have achieved one or the other, or both actually, at this point. And then the ones who haven't are the newer staff that are working their way through that. It takes about 3 years on average to get through them. So we're pretty pleased with that number right now. A few items of note here. We've seen some increases across the board in the city. RFBs, those are the rapid flashing beacons that are placed at crosswalks. A lot of them go in at roundabouts. So I was really surprised when I saw the total number come in. 83, that's a lot. 30 this year. A lot of those are because of the roundabouts. They're about $7,500 each. Does that sound right? For just the materials. And then the installation is on top of that. And we have knockdowns of those every year, a couple of them. So, and the back order takes a little time to get those back up and running. So we're trying to get some onto shelf so we can get those moving faster back in service. Center lane miles, it looks like we've increased 5 this year, up to 205. Roundabouts added 4 this year.
What kind of effect does roundabouts have on the services that you provide for them to be called out as their own?
They increase in multiple ways. They're difficult to stripe. You actually have to shut down a lane, shut down a roundabout to stripe it. So you have to detour a long ways around for the motoring public to get around the roundabout on each leg. There's 4 legs. So that's a problem. It's a challenge more than a problem. And then also same goes for plowing. So when you come through, if you can imagine plowing it, you have to systematically go through each leg with multiple vehicles and cycle back through it. So it takes a fair amount of time to get through each roundabout and move that snow into a place where it's not affecting the drivers. There's a couple of examples.
Okay.
Signs and the sidewalks, those are the total numbers that were reported to me. I don't have the numbers that were increased this year. Looking ahead to the winter, we have 4 gated snowplows that go on our loaders. They're on order, and I'm hoping to have them in October and get those set up on our loaders. At that point, we'll have 8 gated plows on our loaders, which will really help us be efficient through the city plowing. We did get an icebreaker. Thank you. We approved that last budget, and we were able to get that earlier this spring. So that's all ready to go. When we do that snow floor that just doesn't come up with the plows, we can break it up and get it moving. And then sanders, we were able to replace 2 of our non-functioning sanders with snowplow or dump truck replacements that we included with that replacement. So those, we have 5 total now. So that, I think we're in pretty good shape for this winter, if we can get those 4 plows delivered. So that's all I have to report tonight.
Ross, thanks. You guys do a great job. Streets are always difficult to maintain. We hear about it when they're in bad shape. We hear about it when they're being repaired. We hear about it, et cetera, et cetera. And it's one of the services we provide. So as we grow, so do the number of streets, and you guys have done a good job. And you know, I know we're going to be heading into the snow season in the not too distant future, hopefully several months yet. And the questions will come up, you know, the complaints will come up, but I know that you folks are doing a very good job on that. And, again, just want to thank you and your whole staff for the efforts that you extend for us.
Sure, appreciate that. That's why we start thinking about it right now.
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
You may already be doing this, but is there a good repurpose for the regrind of streets that we, you know, take the top coat off and then re-asphalt?
Within the city, not particularly. The main use, there's two ways it can be reused. One is to place it down in driveway or parking area and then re-roll it, compact it. It makes for a pretty dense parking area. The other thing we do with it is we send it back to the asphalt recyclers, and they recycle it and turn it back into asphalt to sell, basically.
I see. So that's kind of what we're doing now. We're just sending it back.
We send it back, for the most part.
Do we get any reimbursement for that?
I don't believe
material?
there's a reimbursement because it costs them money to do the whole process. So they take it and we don't have to dump it, so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
Certainly.
I've got one more question. You said we chip sealed 2.7% of the city streets this year. That means it'll take us 37 years to do the whole city. And obviously that's longer than the lifetime of the road service. I want to hear your opinion on where should we be with that? Do we actually need to be doing every lane mile every 7 years? Are there some that we need to do more frequently than others? Is it okay that we're just not able to get to some of them? Or is it actually causing maintenance problems?
It's a great question, and I don't know if I have a good answer for it, honestly. We can look to other cities and see what they're doing. I'm not sure if that's best management practice throughout. I mean, I think it depends on our climate, where we're at. So to say 7 years, I think that's ideal. I mean, that's the best of all worlds if we had a budget that could support that. 10 years, that might work for us. It's difficult to say exactly what number, what percentage is right for us. We can look into it a little deeper and see what makes sense for us. But ultimately, it's going to be about what we can afford. And as the prices continue to go up for these services, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, there's a big gap between 37 years and 10 years.
Right. Also a big gap in price.
Yeah.
To do that.
And I would assume that some roads are going to need, one of the questions you asked, Randy, some roads are going to need to be resurfaced or chip sealed more frequently than others, some of the busier roads.
Yes, yeah, and we, our practice right now is the following year, after we do our grinding and then resurfacing of our roads, it has to sit a year. And that's one of the reasons you'll see a road that's been paved and nothing's happened, and then the following year it comes back and it gets chipped. So that's been our practice. You really want to seal that up from water and UV, so that's the reason to do that. So when you have a road that's already toast, it's just old, it's 25, 30 years, how much benefit is there to chip sealing a road like that versus letting it go, then at some point grinding it off, repaving it, and then sealing it up and really looking for that longevity of that road.
Right. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ross. Next item, Mayor and Council comments. Joe, it is great to see you back.
Good to be here.
I'm glad you're upright. Is that the term you used?
Some of the time.
You're really fortunate, so I'm glad you're back and making recovery. School started. Please be careful. Our little darlings out there that somehow forget to watch for cars. Ross, you mentioned the rapid flashing beacons. I stopped yesterday for when people trying to cross the road weren't kids, but they were using it. So I would encourage kids to push the button. Some don't think it's cool, and they don't do it. They just run out in front of you. But please drive defensively and watch out for little kids, especially with school started. Council comments.
I'd
I
like
would,
oh,
sorry, go ahead.
you-
Stephanie.
Thanks. I think the River City Music Festival is officially done, and I just want to say thank you to all of the staff that worked really hard on that. I had the pleasure of being out there one night, and lots of vendors, lots of great citizens, and I know the city staff was out there for many of their Wednesdays in the summer, and I appreciate all the work that they were doing there, so thank you to them.
Nathan?
I was just going to add, just as from a personal experience standpoint, not only kids, pedestrians, but also new drivers that are driving back and forth to the high school. Please be careful with them out there.
That's for sure. We do need an executive session tonight.
We do.
Move to enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061A to consider the hiring of public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent wherein the respective qualities of individuals are to be evaluated in order to fill a particular vacancy or need. Further, no action will be taken during the session. The session will last approximately 10 minutes.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Motion passes. Warden? Call the meeting back to order. Are there any motions to come forward?
Adjourn?
To adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.